So yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, man, because I really want to talk about this stuff. I
We don't
really
have too
have
many,
the opportunity
we don't have too many people to talk about
yeah,
this stuff.
exactly. I don't have the opportunity to do this with someone who's really, really traveled with it, And I want to say, man, I so appreciate your willingness to travel with Baldwin's work and his life, and then register that travel in a popular format. It's important, and of course that's something very Baldwinian as well, because Jimmy was writing for the widest possible popular audience he could possibly get, and even beyond the writing, he was trying films and everything else he could try to do to get the word out to the people. So that's huge, and I want to we all owe you a debt for that, and that's not easy to do. Yeah, I don't have to tell you that. So here, I'm struck by switching gears now. One of the things that comes up again and again and begin again is, and you just said it, is the notion of the country. We have to address the country. Can the country change? Will the country? This notion of the thing, like that's the American nation, if you want. I must say it's not something I think about very much, but obviously it's something very, very crucial for Baldwin throughout his career, really, in different ways. But I wanted to ask, because I was watching you talk with Kese a couple of weeks ago. I watched the recording of that conversation. I see his book back there. Yeah. We're talking about that book in my other class right now. and because he wants to talk about Mississippi, so he was focusing on autobiographical notes, I think, in Notes of a Native Son, the book. And Baldwin has this following sentence that he wanted to get you to respond to, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So the sentence is where Baldwin says, "I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for that reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to ask you, because you when you were talking with Kese, there was a moment where you said, I think that's a kind of Baldwinian gesture in an American exceptionalism kind of way, that I love the country more than any other country. There's something exceptional about this place. I understood you to mean that it was kind of in the way that the country imagined itself in the 1950s when he was writing that, a kind of nod to that image of the country of itself, which I think is pretty clearly the case. But I wanted to ask you in a different dimension or a different direction about that same thing. Both for you and for your understanding of Baldwin, do you think he thought that there was, in fact, something unique about the relationship of Black people in the United States to the United States that was different from other communities that live here and have lived here? I do.
I do too. Yeah.
I do think that. I absolutely think that. I want to know if you have any sense of that.
Yeah, I think.
Why would he? Is it true that Baldwin thought that Black Americans have a certain unique situation here?
Yeah, but the way he renders it though is different. So oftentimes when people make that sort of claim in African American religious studies, people will invoke, David Howard Pitney's language of the Black Jeremiad, or Wilson Moses's articulation of the Black Jeremiad. That is, that America can't fulfill its promise until it does right by Black people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That we play a special role, right, in the fulfillment of American exceptionalism. Right. So that's one way to render how we are uniquely positioned in the American story. I don't think Baldwin makes that move at all. No. So the idea is not to say that, until you do right by us, America can't become X, Y, and Z. No, I think, we're a particular kind of mirror. Yeah. Our experience reveals something about the character of the country the fact that, you know, they lied about our humanity, right? The fact that, you know, as he writes in the white problem in 1964, you know, the fact that, you know, these Christians took chattel and then denied that they were human beings, because if they were not human beings, then no crime would have been committed.
Right.
That fact, right, distinguishes us in a particular sort of way, in relation to America's hubris, its hypocrisy, its failure.
Yes.
Right. And you have to linger there to really understand why our experience is so important to the revelation around the country itself, it seems to me.
Right. Clearly there. I'm asking, and thank you so much for that. I'm asking almost the reverse question. Like, not only it's not exactly that, I'm not trying to ask, well, I was asking both things, and you answered one part of that just now very, very, very wonderfully. But there's a sense in which I'm not asking exactly, do Black people have a particular role and a unique role in the image of the United States? I'm asking really, what does the United States have particularly and uniquely to do with Black people? And isn't it the White Problem essay where he recounts the story of going to the slave fort? Yeah, and he's looking off from Goree Island, and it's an image I've never been able to get over, where he says, you know, Gloria and I traveled, and we went to the slave fort. We were looking from the door of no return, where captive Africans were put on boats and brought to the West. And he says, you know, and you know, Baldwin's sense of geography is a little strange sometimes, but he says, you know, I looked out over the sea, and he's like, I tried, but I couldn't see the other side. It's too vast. And this is all metaphorical. Then he says, I tried to imagine what it must have been to stand there, speechless in the most total sense of that term. And he's trying to get at this idea that Africans that took that journey into the West and became Black folks, you know, some of them became Black Americans, were on their way into an experience which had utterly no language to describe it. And so the need, of course, the human need to describe experience or to control what one can do in life had to be invented here. In his metaphorical way of seeing it. This isn't exactly historically true in all kinds of ways. You see what I mean? And also I'm thinking of about Baldwin's debt to E. Franklin Frazier. And Frazier's idea, you know what I'm talking about, Frazier and the Herskovits, and Frazier's idea that no, Black folks totally recreated themselves here.
Now I see the part.
Because let me just say one more thing. And I think about other American community, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, whoever, who, in my experience, are constantly toggling back and forth between their lives here and an imagined life, you know, in the old country, so to speak. You know what I mean? But for Black folks, for generations and you know, for centuries, that really wasn't, at least apropos Baldwin's construction of all this, that was far less the case. This stuff had to happen here. That thing, that's what he means by the ocean is too vast. You know, and there are all kinds of interesting particularities about Africa and its place and in Baldwin's imagination as well as in the culture and so forth. But I think I wonder if you have any thoughts about that as it relates to, yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the twinning of that, you know, the kind of twinning of that response, right? The part that I gave you, but you know, I think where it's very clear about how Baldwin is thinking of the space of the United States, what it occasions, what it produces, right? You know, it's like Stuart Hall's classic essay where it's in the New World where you get Présence Africaine, Présence European, and that these things happen, right? That without this, you wouldn't hear the sound of reggae. Without this, you wouldn't hear the sound of the blues. There's something about this place, right? And Baldwin often, in particularly in the early works, he wants to foreground this as a specifically insightful point of entry to the troubling nature of Western modernity itself.
Yes.
And you see it in its most crude form in Princes and Powers. Right. That essay is just horrible.
Okay.
It's horrible in terms of his understanding of the geopolitical landscape, his response to Du Bois's letter. You kind of wonder, who funded Jimmy to go here? This is so, and then the way in which he talks about the uniqueness of African-American voices as he's resisting a certain kind of articulation of negritude, and how he's embracing lambing and the like. But I think it's in that essay where we see more clearly what you're reaching for in terms of how he figures what the US means for the production of a particular kind of Black person.
Yes.
And the role that Black person will play in the world, right? Did I get it that time? I knew it. I had to get there. You helped me.
I'm wondering about. That's what I'm wondering about. And and that's.
It's a terrible essay, though.
Well, it's problematic. I tell you, I kind of. Anyway,
Okay, we can talk about that.
But I'll tell you what, man. That phrase where I know it's in the book about hope being created every day.
Yeah, hope is invented every day. Yeah.
And he rephrases that in There Be Dragons. Salvation has to be recreated every day. Same.
Yeah.
That phrase, that sentence is verbatim in there out of Senghor's mouth, where he talks about the energy of art has to be created every day. And Baldwin says, that was something that made a great deal of sense to me. And he got something there. And there's some other funny stuff in there about because there's a Yoruba poet who's forming poems. And Baldwin, of course, can't understand any of it. But there's a certain kind of translation, and he talks about this, he talks about the rhythmic nature of this domestic scene. And then he learns that the poem is describing pounding yams, what he doesn't know is that in Yoruba, the idiom for pounding yams is sex.
Right.
When you say I was pounding yams, like that's just a slang for sex.
Uh-huh.
So, he kind of got it.
Yeah, but
that essay is so interesting.
It's clear that at a certain level, he just didn't really have a good grasp of the geopolitics of the moment.
No, and certainly didn't think much of the alternatives he was being presented with.
Absolutely.
Although, like I say, there were some things made an impression.
Oh no, the lambing was just brilliant in that moment.
Yeah.
And brave in that moment. And Baldwin gravitated to him for a reason. It makes sense to me. And he pulls that thread is pulled through all the way to his hesitation around Black Power, as you know. So, or hesitations.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
I was struck a couple times in the book in Begin Again where I think there's one moment where you say basically, Black Power put this image out, scared America, and Baldwin thought that it was understood it very well and thought it was perfectly reasonable. This new way of imagining the freedom movement, if you want.